And if the school budget is at all controversial, that feeds people coming and voting on that. And if the library is controversial, that feeds people coming to repeal what the town meeting did or whatever. Anyhow, the number of voters at the referendum is potentially significantly larger and significantly more diverse than it might be at a special town meeting.
But the chances of them having thought about the issue are much
It's probably
less.
smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the tail on the dog as opposed to being the dog at a special town meeting.
That's helpful, thank you. That's helpful, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, so with all that in mind,
Yeah.
let me call for a hand vote in favor of timeline number 1, leading to a special town meeting
In May.
in May.
Done.
Looks pretty
Pretty good.
unanimous to me.
Want to recount?
No, I don't want to recount.
Yeah,
So we don't even have to worry.
The upstate vote.
All right, thank you very much. The select board chair has our input. We're still waiting for technology. Are we good?
Whoa.
We good?
There's a thumb.
Good to go.
All right. Just for the perspective of the community, we've just decided on a timeline that the task force is going to follow, leading to our recommendation to put this before a special town meeting in May to look at the comprehensive plan for approval by the town. Now, while we're still on that topic, and I don't want to steal too much of Judy's thunder here, but, and this is a little bit out of schedule with the agenda, but I wanted to just sort of flesh out what I think might be a reasonable outreach plan, get your thoughts on that. And it goes as follows. Between now and basically the first week in March 8th, where the first public hearing would be, I think we can make use of the following to get the word out about the plan. Use the town mailing list to mail it out. Use social media to put the essence of the plan on social media. Use a handout or make handouts available at the town meeting in March so that people can walk away with a copy of the nuts and bolts of the plan. Maybe put together a program on Harpswell TV like we did several months ago. Hopefully it will work out that we don't have the technical problems that we did, but that's another effective way. And then, of course, responsibility of us to kind of meet with smaller groups if we can, whether it's neighborhood groups or social groups or whatever. And I know I got an email from Dave earlier, for example, that the Harpswell Heritage Land Trust had offered to put something about the plan in their next newsletter, or in a newsletter, which I think sort of goes along with reaching out to other groups. So those are some of the things that I kind of fleshed out. I don't believe trying to hold another big meeting is gonna work out very well. We have enough of that going on. So I'm looking for mailings, handouts, small group meetings, Harpswell TV, and I'll open it up to any thoughts that you guys and gals might have to add to that.
One
Dave?
possibility would be letters to the anchor.
Okay, Anchor, absolutely.
Yeah.
Media, yeah, Anchor. Good.
That goes out to everybody, doesn't it?
Yep, okay. So if we add the Anchor, does that sound like a reasonable mix of ways to get the word out to the people? I mean-
Does this meeting get on local television?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. And, most of our meetings have been taped and broadcast. sometimes I look painfully at the way I look on a TV screen, but nonetheless, it's there. Anyway, and so that's another way to kind of reach out to the public.
Now, this is all to encourage people to show up at the public meetings.
And also to give them sort of the essence of the plan, the vision statement. What are the most important parts of the plan? What are the main things that we want them to focus on in terms of supporting the plan?
I'd add one thing, early on, next week even, is that you as the chair of the committee ought to do this. Look at the table of contents of part one and divide it up to the extent that there are parts that are obvious, and send a directed message to the chair of each of our town committees and saying, this section is relevant to your committee's work. Please, if you
Yep.
wish, we hope that your committee will look at this section and give us feedback, but actually to request it in a kind of a serious way. They don't have to.
I can do that.
If they don't want to, but
We do have input from a number of different committees and organizations, but that's certainly worth doing, and I'll certainly do that,
Yeah.
follow up with that. Anything else?
So, maybe you mentioned this and I didn't hear it. In addition, I think it's a good list of outlets, but we should also make sure to put an article on the actual website itself.
Town website, yeah. Now, all of this presumes that we all agree, or to the extent that we possibly can, that this is the plan that we're gonna put forward to the community. So we need to reach a conclusion soon about what this plan is gonna look like, what are the basic things that we wanna communicate, and then we can put these flyers and mailings together and feel confident that we're hitting all the high points. Bob, you look,
well, at least in terms of my suggestion of getting feedback from the committees, I hope that we're not gonna decide tonight, oh, this is the plan that's going out. We have until the public meeting, or a week before, to send it to the select board for final
yeah, but
vetting.
I think if we wanna send something out to the community, we need to be comfortable that what we're packaging
Close, yeah.
is close. We can maybe futz around with some of the details.
How would you work that into your timeline? Sort of the final draft date, because
I've-
that's probably critical, isn't it?
The final draft has to be done by March 6th if we go with the town meeting.
March 6th.
The committee has to approve it and put it forward. You have to send it out. So that,
You were
March.
thinking earlier, weren't you?
Well, I was thinking earlier only because, to get some of the information out in the ways that we just outlined.
right, I would say, I mean, you want to have a plan that you mostly are good with. Some tweaking around the edges
By,
can
let's,
happen before March 6th,
by, let's say,
but
mid-February or something.
Mid-February, I would say
Mid-February,
you wanna-
okay? So
you wanna-
between now and mid-February, we've got to resolve any differences or concerns that we have.
I think that's fair, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
Yeah.
So Al, we could, I agree with like pretty much everything here so far. We don't have to wait until we're clear about the contents of the final contents of the plan to at least start communicating, for example, the schedule that we just agreed on. Could be an article on the website, it could be,
Right.
30-second spot that they rotate through on Harpswell TV, coming soon, here's the schedule, watch out for this, just to get it in people's minds
Yeah.
that it's coming, so you
Right.
find the pump.
Right, exactly, good. Okay, those are the two things that I wanted to talk about from my perspective, and at this point, I want to turn it over to Judy to talk about the draft plan.
okay. Well, I'd also want to turn it over to all of you to talk about the draft plan, but, so we sent out the two sections. I emailed you one of them. I didn't want to make your email so big that you couldn't download it, because they were big files, so the other one I just give you a link to. It's not, so this part one has the executive summary, the future land use plan, the goals, policies, and, strategies. And, And that's really the part that people are gonna read for the most part, right? The second part are gonna be the appendices, so that's all the inventories that we created, other town reports, like the housing committee's report, when it's finalized, we'll put in the appendices.
How about the input from the working waterfront community? Is that gonna be in there?
Well, most of it we've already incorporated, but I'm happy to put the letter in as a separate, mostly there's report, I mean, we've gotten lots of stuff from people
Yeah,
that
it's,
isn't going
it's,
in there
I
as a.
think, actually, I think that, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think it would be important to at least say, hey, these guys have weighed in an official way, and it's part. The other thing is the input we got from the Fire and Rescue Committee.
Right. But that's already been put into the plan, like all of their input
Right.
is in the inventory. And
Right, but
so
if
it's
somebody
been
wants,
added.
if somebody wants to see the full,
But we can, yep,
Yeah.
we can add that in there.
Okay.
It's just that we don't have a way, so I guess my only consideration about that would be, you know, we haven't said we're gonna keep all correspondence that we've gotten and make it all part of the plan.
right,
So that would mean that, you know, those two that we got, I can put in, but other correspondence we've gotten in lots of different ways, from face to face to,
right,
you know, and so that won't be included in there, so, I mean, I think it's just something to think about how that
okay.
gets recorded. But, I mean, we certainly took all of that information and put it in, I mean, we added the stuff that we got from the fire department, and then Phil looked at it particularly, so, you know, and addressed some issues that we needed to make fit in with things, so, like, that's happened, Mary Ann's had conversation, and some other people from conservation, on the conservation chapters, and they've talked to us about it, so we have had lots of input that we've incorporated. You know, we took what George gave us and incorporated it in, you know, if we've missed something, let us know, but I'm perfectly happy to add those, I don't have a problem with adding them, I'm just saying that there's been lots more that's come in that I don't have, like, as a PDF that I could
Okay,
add.
all right, okay, understand. Okay, now, I have a couple of things at the start here.
Okay,
The land acknowledgement,
yep,
is this something that the state is pushing, or is it,
take it out if you don't want it.
everybody know what I'm talking about? It's recognize the stewardship of the Abenaki people and so on and so forth. Do people feel comfortable leaving that in as part of the plan?
It's true.
Okay, good. I just wanted to double check.
There's an element in these land acknowledgement statements is, yeah, we stole it from you, we're gonna keep it, but we're really sorry.
We're gonna
Yeah,
try to
really
keep it
sorry.
nicely.
But anyway,
Yeah.
it's nice to say we're sorry.
Okay. Let me open it up. How do you want to handle this? Do you want to, as an open discussion, or do you want to?
Well, so I think, so we have a couple things to talk about. So one, I think, would be the organization of, you know, the order of things, the way that it's put in there, of part one. Then, I think we could talk about the executive summary particularly, and if people have comments on how, you know, on things that need to be added to, taken out of, fixed in that. And then thirdly, we have to get back to the future land use, and I mean, people might have a different opinion, but it seemed like at our last meeting, we got through everything except for the interior zone, whether or not we allowed an affordable housing. That was where we kind of ended, saying we were gonna talk about that some more, an affordable housing, bonus. The only other thing in the future land use plan that we'll need to talk about, but not tonight, is that the Affordable Housing Committee would like to separate out the two town-owned properties to have slightly different standards within them, but I don't know what those are gonna be yet. So that'll be for the next meeting, and that'll just have to do with those two town-owned properties and the standards within those. So, so that'll have to be at the next meeting, but, so those are the three things I think for tonight: the overall organization of part one, the executive summary, and the interior zone affordable housing, unless there's some other part of the land use, future land use, that you think that we needed to go over again. Mark?
Maybe this is extraneous and you don't want to go there. But one of the things, when I went back and read through not the entire plan, but the beginning, was I was struck by the vision statements in that unless you really read stuff into them, there is nothing in the vision statements about the groundwater issue. And so, I don't know whether that's important, but the plan says there are 3 important issues that we're addressing in here, yet the vision doesn't include anything about the groundwater. That's number 1. Number 2, there is a list of priorities in there, and this is my anal thing, is if I were gonna do them, I would put them in the order of importance, and that the priority for the 3 things that are identified as the most important issues would be the first 3 priorities. Maybe that's an organizational issue, it gets into a whole bunch of reorganization, but what struck me is that as you go through the plan, the 3 key issues get sort of called out in the executive summary, but when you get into the rest of the plan, they get lost. They get treated just the same way as all of the other things. And I think that's a fundamental rearrangement issue that needs to be dealt with.
Good point.
But I think the question of vision, priorities, and I know those were done a year ago in an early process, but now we're at the end where we've said this is what we want to do. To me, they should match.
I wasn't gonna bring this up, but since Mark did, I will bring it up. I think one of the other things, as is said in the draft future land use plan, that the town, what I heard, maybe I'm wrong, was that people want to maintain the rural character that's left in Harpswell. And I don't really see that specifically in the vision priorities.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sort of the development pattern and the groundwater, which become 2 of the major issues, really aren't reflected in the vision.
They're not. They're not.
Sorry.
So Mark, you saw the enabling residential growth that sustains water quality as not referring to the water issue that you're thinking about?
Well, I'm saying it sort of does. You've got to kind of read it into it.
Well, I think we could probably use that and add a couple of words, phrases or words to incorporate that. But I also agree that if we're gonna call them priorities, that we ought to list our top priorities clearly up front and then have everything else kind of follow.
And, you know, it's enable residential growth. That's the first thing. That protects groundwater quality. That's kind of, as Mark said, I think you have to read between the lines to really get that protecting groundwater quality is one of the top 3 concerns that people said in every meeting.
So, I mean, we could say enable residential growth that sustains water,
I would say sustained groundwater quality, ensure and protect groundwater quality while allowing for,
okay,
No.
groundwater.
you know,
I would suggest maybe that it go in the preserving the beauty and resilience of our waters, open space, and natural settings. I think if you add it there and move the growth up to, you know, those, then that makes those 3, the working waterfront, water, and rural. I think you could add in protecting groundwater resources and rural character of the town, because it fits in with open space and all those things in that priority. And then you could move enabling residential growth that sustains water quality, and those three be the top three, because then that would fit in with what? No? We can make a new one, it doesn't matter to me.
Just
Why
saying.
couldn't we combine, it's easier for me to point, these two, basically kind of increasing the availability and diversity of housing options, just blah, 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 and then add onto the back of it, that sustains water quality, transportation, and the environment while providing the housing needs for a diverse community. They're almost essentially the same exact thing, just worded differently.
That doesn't work for me because it's not a top priority. It's mixing, it's what Mark said, it's mixing
I'm not
up.
saying necessarily make it a top priority, but I mean, you could eliminate one whole priority by combining the two, because they're essentially the same thing, and just making it less wordy.
I guess I'm not, if you want to rewrite it and then say it again, maybe I would understand it better. I'm not really clear about what you're saying.
I guess the way I would rewrite it would be increasing the availability and diversity of housing options to support young families, the workforce, older adults, and the fishing community that sustains water quality, transportation, and the environment while providing housing needs for a diverse community.
So combine.
It does seem longer that way, but I don't really see where there's much difference between the two, I guess, is my point.
How do people feel about that?
I think this raises an interesting question about how we organize the report, because it's a comprehensive plan. But I think there's another element which we all sort of understand. A comprehensive plan is comprehensive, for goodness sake. It's lots of stuff. We're already working on 60 pages, and that's just the beginning by another month. But I think there is a point at which, and maybe this could be handled in terms of how it's dealt with in the forward or in a very punchy section and not the executive summary, because the executive summary summarizes the comprehensive plan, so that's it. I think the question is, and this has to do with vision. This vision priorities is an interesting statement. I think the question that we ought to ask ourselves, and maybe we should put it on the agenda so we have time to pre-think, is there a statement we want to make to Harpswell as a task force and put it in the plan to say, we think in the next 10 years, there is one or two, no more, serious challenges which we must address. And they are, and then we can have a discussion, which they are. But just to highlight that in terms of the overall question. And then, by the way, here's the comprehensive plan about the functioning of the government of Harpswell over the next 10 years. But to make a distinction and to say, are there things? It could be we don't think there are. That housing, water, climate change, whatever, are all sort of equal. And if there is, that's fine, then let's just do this. But I think we should be challenged that a vision is more than just a work plan. And I'm not sure that's the makings of a work plan, it seems to me, and that's the issue that's been raised. I just think that, are there one or two things? And I would say, I think we probably could agree what they are. I think the biggest threat to our town as we envision it is working waterfront as an issue. And we could pick another one, but that we really highlight that as a serious issue. And then we can resolve this question of how those things rank and how they're worded.
So in the executive summary, that is what we tried to do, is to say, these are the most important priorities. Sorry.
And I think, I think the executive summary makes a good start of doing that. To me, the problem is, to anybody who's a critical reader and gets down to the vision and the priorities and says, are these connected? does what comes out of this as being most important reflected in what you said were the pieces that go into it? And that, to me, it's not a big issue, but I think it's an important one, that there be a consistent theme. And this is my soapbox, but at the start of this process, my understanding that the criticism of the 2005 plan was, one, that it didn't focus on specific things. It was all over the place, everything was equal, and there were too many strategies and recommendations, and I'm going to pick on Judy a little here. I think it says there are 240. I think when I counted them, there were only 239. But
That's progress.
but to me, I think a question for you is, have you done what you criticized the 2005 plan for? And is there a lot of stuff in there that could be redlined or put someplace else? And to focus on what's really important. I think that's what you said, what other people said was important in this process.
So are you referring to the executive summary or the whole plan?
I think, in one hand, the executive summary, but in terms of the way everything else is dealt with, I mean, if I remember correctly, I think where the groundwater shows up is in the maybe third or fourth item in the,
Gets lost.
when it starts to lay out the goals, policies, and strategies.
Pardon me, the implementation plan, the matrices that,
No, in the, before
Yeah, so I
that.
think that's a mistake that we made putting it together, so.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, that's
Yeah.
just an
Because I think
organizational
like those
thing.
things, so the goals, policies, and strategies, we should move that and then pull out, these are the most important 5 things that you should do, right? And those in regarding
Right,
the, future land use plan, which perhaps we should change the name of, because in this section, it's not really the future land use plan, but it's how growth might happen, how you could, how you wanna see growth happen, not a future land use plan. And working waterfront and groundwater, and growth and housing, cause I would agree that they go together. So maybe that part, we sort of rejigger and we pull that out of, make it its own section in the implementation plan that said, or before the implementation, that says, and that's what I intended for it to be. I think I just looked at it for too long. I was cross-eyed.
A quick question, Judy.
Yep.
The footers on this thing, call the first 30 pages executive summary. I think that's an error, isn't it? Because by page 17, you then have the action plan section.
Yep, we gotta fix it.
When you mean executive summary, you mean the first 16 pages.
Yeah.
Is that
Yep,
right?
yeah,
Okay, that helps me a lot. Yeah. Sorry.
yes.
This might be picky, but I have a trouble with the word enabling. To me, it connotes that the plan encourages something, and then therefore the town encourages something. So it's enabling residential, whatever the rest of it is.
residential growth.
I don't, and again, this may be picky, I don't want the town to seem to be enabling residential growth. I mean, I think we need affordable housing for sure. I don't think we need any more subdivisions, of $500,000 homes. And we have lots of land that could be developed for exactly that. I mean, I do agree with the rest of it about, encouraging the groundwater to be used well and, et cetera.
Well,
A
here's-
word like assuring,
Yeah, here's my suggestion for the vision. since there was a small committee that put most of that together, and you guys have made comments about some changes you might like to see, I would suggest that that committee reconvene and come back with a suggestion of, having heard what people said, because we're not gonna wordsmith it tonight.
Exactly.
So,
It's crazy to wordsmith it in this group.
yes, it wouldn't, but there was a group of people who put this together, and
That's right.
I think that same group of people should take this and make some changes that people have recommended.
Excellent.
I would be helpful to me if I'm a member of the group that was
I believe you
there.
convened it.
Yes. If people would send me their comments.
Yeah,
So what you suggest.
yeah.
So, for instance, if you think two of them should be combined,
Sure.
please send me your language and.
Just in an email, I assume?
Yeah,
Yeah.
an email will be fine.
Good
Now, two
suggestion.
folks that participated in that process are no longer here.
Who's
Do you need
that?
any more, like, volunteers from the community?
We have, Monique was on the committee, and I think Howard Levitan
Howard, yes.
as
Yeah.
a citizen control. So how many other people are, besides
I think it's
yourself,
me.
are left? It's you. So we
So maybe
need,
if we have 3 people, if there's 2 other people who wanna help Dave with some rewording.
Let's encourage Dave to co-opt people with phone calls, but to
Yeah.
come back with something.
all right, so, I guess if we send you inputs, we will be your
Committee.
ghost committee, if you will.
Yeah.
And then you can, I'll be happy to help you if you want someone to
Okay.
put it together.
Good
I just
suggestion.
want to caution as, to make the goals very concise and very pointed. If you try to make an alphabet soup out of them, which is what planning groups do, that's like they throw everything in the box, close the lid, and then go, don't have to look
Yeah.
at that anymore. No, I think that they need to be very succinct, very direct and concise. And they to really say what it is. And then the things in the plan need to back them up. So,
Yeah, I
If-
thought.
yeah.
I thought it was very helpful that later in the document, we have these priorities with the goals that are gonna need to be accomplished to make them happen. So that was a linkage to more concrete stuff that I thought was very helpful.
Okay.
But I would recommend not trying to fold these all together. I mean, we could write one item that touches all these bases, but I don't think it would have the same aspirational quality which we were trying to achieve originally.
Just good to review them after all the discussions we've had with the new light.
Okay, any other
Actually
questions or
moves the
comments on
agenda
the
forward.
executive?
This is great.
Any other questions or comments on
Or on the general organization
executive
of.
plan?
Yeah.
I do want to echo something that Mark talked about. It would be helpful if we took those 239/40 strategies and, really just focused on the top 2 or 3 strategies for
Well, and
those,
that's-
for those things that,
That is exactly what this does. So those strategies are right here.
Right.
We picked out the top 3 under working waterfront, right to fish.
That's right.
Land use review, harbor management. We picked out the
Right.
top 3 under the environment. And they could be different ones. You guys could tell me that those are not the ones that you thought. I will remind you that when I gave you those lists of
Yes.
all those things and
I know.
asked you to review them and take things out that you didn't want, and I asked you to vote on them, you all said, but they're all important. We don't want any of them to be deleted, and I promised you I wouldn't delete them if you would just vote on them
I don't
so that we
think.
could prioritize them.
I don't
So-
think that, it's not that they're not important, I
Yeah.
think, but I think from the standpoint of communicating to the rest of the community,
Right.
that this can be put someplace else in the package of, total package of information. And, either reference, for additional strategies and so on, see page, whatever.
Yeah. So I think, and part of, I'm trying to get down there to that part. Somewhere. Oh, it's probably at the bottom. One of the things that I have not managed to do yet is to fill in the time frame, responsible party,
God.
and
Right
so, So I think, so the other thing is that, timeframe was gonna show priority, right? Like, we're gonna make the things that need to be addressed, they might take a long time, but you wanna start on them, right away. So those will be the ones that we say should be addressed in the next 6 months, or at least started to be addressed in the next 6 months. And then, other things will be in there as, something that can happen further down the road. So that will by definition happen when I get that filled in.
So just, one question or comment. All of those items, those generally weren't dreamt up by us, right? Those reflect feedback and input we got from the various forums generally?
Right, I mean, we tried to take what we heard and, what the research showed in the inventory chapters and say, here's where the issues and implications were, and here's ways that you could address those. And, so again, if anybody reads through them and says, this one should be taken out, it's dumb, it's superfluous, it's whatever, let us know. And
But just as a note, this plan, comprehensive plan, is not going to explain the totality of activities in Harpswell in the next 10 years.
Right.
It's not going to dictate, with no changes, the agenda of the select board. It's not going to dictate what our committees are doing. It is a guidance with some firm footing under it. And I think the critical question always to ask is, it's the state and the to me, dropping stuff out of that matrix is not a sin. It doesn't mean it won't be done. It just means it's not on that list. That's all. And the second thing is, the question, if I understand correctly why we're doing this plan, frankly, is because the state wants it, and because if any of our committees or the select board or any elements of the town want to ask for money from the state, they're going to look at this thing. So we want to make sure we've covered our backsides on that question, and that's the most important question to ask, actually over and above vision, which is important.
no, I agree. I mean, you don't want to have 5 strategies
Yeah.
when you finish your plan, even if there's only 5 that are the most important, because you might decide 5 years from now that you really want to apply for a grant for number 112. Right, and if it's not in your plan, you could still apply for the grant unless it's a community development block grant, then you can't. But you want to have it in there to support that kind of work, and because priorities might change over time, so you want to make it broad enough to cover the basics, but not watered down so much that you don't know which are the most important things that you're going to spend your effort and your energy working on.
Good point.
Okay, any other comments on the plan executive summary before we go to the future land use?
Any comments on the executive summary itself,
No,
other than making that change?
Judy, I think what you said about the title Future Land Use Plan is not a good title. I mean, I think the policy or the objective is in terms of managing change in the community or growth in the community. And one of the tools for doing that is the Future Land Use Plan. And I do think one of the issues has been, well, the current scheme of land use regulation isn't creating the change that the community desires. Therefore, the plan recommends changes to that. I think that connection is key.
One question that I did not know the answer to, just this is a very detailed, but I didn't know when the committee was formed because it was formed before we started.
I think it was officially requested in November of 2021.
Really?
And I don't think we got everybody together until early '22. So I would say early 2022 for the full committee.
Probably start having minutes then.
The select board minutes ought to indicate that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the first part of the time we spent here in this committee was really getting educated
Right.
on what had been done before, specifically the 2005 plan.
Right.
And
We just wanted to give you all kudos for the amount of time you've been here. So we wanted to put in.
Well, you could look at it the other way, too.
Spinning our wheels.
Okay.
I have a question. Part of the future land use plan, a major underpinning of it is to regulate lot size by bedrooms, by number of bedrooms. Where did that idea come from? And is there any community that we can call to ask them, how's that working for you?
Yes.
Because the only ones I could see were from Florida.
No, there are communities in Maine that do that. And I'll have to dig back. I think Saco does it in certain zones. I think Sanford does it. Gorham has provisions relative to certain zones that regulate density by the number of bedrooms.
Well, if you will send me that information, I would, or send it to, whomever,
All of us.
I would be happy to call and just ask them how it's working for them. Because I think we should do our homework on that.
I
Yep.
agree.
And I think the other part of that is that the town's consultant to the Affordable Housing Working Group said, she's done a number of communities in New Hampshire and Vermont that use it, and she recommended it strongly.
Well, then, I mean, again,
Yep.
I can pay for long-distance phone calls, I'm happy to do that. I
Yep.
just would really like to talk to someone who's, seen it through and see what their experience is.
Yeah.
And I think we owe it to ourselves to do that. If we're gonna make this recommendation, we should do our homework.
Okay, Mark will send something out, and we'll follow up with.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, Judy,
Okay, future land use plan.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anybody say that we need to talk about anything else, so why don't we focus on the interior zone? I can get to it.
What page tell us what page you're
I
on when you
will.
do that, so we can look if
I
we have.
am on page 28.
by the way, if there's page 14, look for it, because I couldn't find it.
I think it's a map, right?
It's nothing.
Oh, it's nothing. It can happen.
It went from 13 to 15,
Ah,
so. I thought you were using a trick that I used to use in college or something.
yeah, I wanted it to seem like it was even more pages.
Well, there's an interesting question.
Strategies.
Did something, is page 14 get written and got left out, or? is it
No.
Somehow the computer
It's
just screwed up?
It's just something in design that.
Because all of the numbers after that are obviously,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's on the
Well,
ball.
in my version.
That's why he's the chair.
In your version?
Nailed it.
He's
When
been
you
checking
get
the
down to the
pages.
action plan, it goes 20, 22, 24, 26.
We'll fix all the page numbers. No worries.
Okay.
Okay, but we're on,
All right, so we're on 26, is that what you said? No.
28.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so the question that we were discussing last time was having the attainable housing subdivision incentive. And it says, cluster subdivisions require 50% of the parcel to be permanent open space, 10,000, oops, I forgot 0 square feet, excluding open space for each bedroom. I think the question was, do we want to keep that in the interior zone, or do we not want to allow that kind of a bonus in the interior zone and only allow it in the mixed use and those planned attainable housing areas? Mark?
First of all, the description of it is not what the attainable housing report says. And secondly, by way of discussion, The Attainable Housing Working Group was supposed to meet this morning, but decided, given the weather situation, it wouldn't and it would wait. But the recommendation, I think, from them, and I'm sort of going out and on a limb speaking for them because it varies, was that the recommendation would be that it be allowed, the concept of affordable housing subdivisions be allowed in the rural area, much like the workforce housing provisions are currently allowed everywhere in the interior district, that the provision be that the base density be 7,500 square feet per bedroom for the developable area of the parcel, and that it has to be developed as cluster development in which 50% is set aside. That actually reduces the density that would be allowed from the current workforce housing provisions that allow units in a workforce housing subdivision or on individual lots to be 20,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So for a 3 or 4 bedroom house, as what's being proposed by the Affordable Housing Working Group would actually call for a larger lot area than the town has allowed for the last 15 years in the interior district.
I have a question, and I'm gonna say this, and I will probably not stop saying it, but I think we need to be really careful about this, folks. We have a real conflict of sorts between wanting to maintain rural character and providing affordable housing. And I think at some point, it's going to kick us in the butt if we don't really have an open discussion about it. And I think we're sort of gliding over it right now. What is being proposed here is for subdivisions to essentially have their lot size reduced by half. So instead of 80,000 square feet per unit for a subdivision, it will be reduced to 40. So if you...
Not correct.
Well, just that, it's based on bedroom size, Mark, but if you have a 2-bedroom house, it's 40,000 or less.
Well, no, currently,
It's 80.
no, currently, if it's a workforce housing
I'm not
subdivision,
talking about workforce housing.
that's what
I'm
this
sorry.
is.
Okay,
This is a replacement for the workforce housing provision to simplify it. Currently, in a workforce housing subdivision,
Okay,
the minimum lot size for affordable units is 20,000 square feet.
okay.
That's what's been on the books for 15 years. This essentially has the same density requirement for a 3-bedroom home. It does not reduce the lot size over what you can do now everywhere in the interior district.
Okay, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but is the proposal not to reduce the lot sizes for subdivisions from 80,000 square feet to 45,000 square feet for a 2-bedroom unit across the board, whether
Yes,
it's workforce
yes,
housing or
yes.
not? Am I not correct about that?
You are
Yeah,
correct.
but that has nothing to do with this.
I said that. I said I'm talking about something else.
Oh, all right.
I know, I'm talking about, I'm sorry that I'm not being clear. We're coming to a point where the desire to maintain rural character and to provide affordable housing needs to be fully discussed. Because if we want to maintain rural character, then we're also proposing here that in a subdivision, which today would require 80,000 square feet per dwelling unit, that would be reduced to 45,000 square feet for a 2-bedroom unit.
That's correct.
I would submit to you that we will see a lot of subdivision proposals for 2-bedroom units coming up. That would mean that the development on Peabody Road would have twice as many units, dwelling units, lots, as it has now. It would mean that the Trufant Somerton subdivision would have twice as many lots on it that it does now. I think it's really important that we keep this in mind. That is not maintaining rural character. That is suburbanization. And if you don't think that Harpswell is going to get pressured to suburbanize, look at what's happening in Brunswick. That is right on our doorstep, and it's going to come in. So this proposal calls for reducing by almost half what we currently have on the books right now. I just want to make sure we're all clear about that. That is not protecting rural character. The other thing that we need to be really careful about, we think that, oh, okay, we're going to have workforce housing or attainable housing, but we'll require that 50% of it is in open space. And that's great, but go look at Larrabee Farms in Brunswick. Larrabee Farms is part of a conservation development, and they allocated 50% of it as open space. That's one of the worst projects that land trust ever did. Because what happens when you do this with open space? The developer, unless we require, and we're careful, will take wetlands, steep slopes, anything that's not usable, and include that in their open space plan. So we have to be really careful when we do this, because it's very easy to say, oh, that's fine, but it doesn't always work out the way you think it's going to work out. So I cannot support taking subdivisions and reducing them by bedroom size to 45,000 square feet for a two-bedroom unit. I just can't support that. And I'm just going to say it up front, and it's just the way, you know, if people disagree, that's just fine with me. But I can't go out to the town and say that I support this plan if that's what's in it.
Amy, does your position change if it says that it increases the lot size for 2/3 or 3/4 of the units that are built in the town?
I would have to see what that looks like. I can't envision that.
And the reason I say that is Judy provided some numbers that
Yes.
says in the last 10 years, 65, 67, something like that, percent of the housing units that were built not in subdivisions, but on lots where the requirement is 40,000 square feet.
That's right. That's right.
And most of those are 3 and 4 bedroom houses, not 2-bedroom houses.
But-
So now,
Yep.
where you have a 40,000 square foot lot with a 3 or 4 bedroom unit, under this, you would have to have 60,000 or 75,000 square feet for a 3 or 4 bedroom unit.
I think what we're going to see, Mark, is a lot of two-bedroom developments. That's what we're going to see.
Well, isn't that what the town wants?
Well, I guess on.
I mean, if we
yes, it
talk
is.
about, a goal is to diversify housing.
I'm not going to argue with you, Mark. I just am
No,
trying to.
I'm asking that question because you could be right. But the town has said, I think, and this committee has said, the path of more expensive, larger houses, unaffordable to residents of the community, is not a good direction for the community. What we want to encourage in the community is, and I think it says it in here, a diversity of housing and housing that meets the needs of the community.
It has also said it wants to maintain rural character.
Understand that.
And I think that is, so what I would suggest is that instead of zoning the 90% of the town and reducing the lot sizes in subdivisions by half, is that we allocate certain areas. And this is where the growth area thing comes back to bite us in the butt.
Yeah, right.
Well, there are certain areas that have been allocated for attainable housing, right? There's the area, yeah, Mitchell Field area, and there's the area off of Doughty Point Road.
Yeah, my neighborhood.
So those were specifically called out and mapped as attainable housing. And also, the Attainable Housing Committee, I think, admitted themselves that, you know, what we're essentially gonna end up doing is nibbling at this. It's not gonna be an explosion, but I think you have some good points that need to be considered. It's kind of threading the needle between,
Would it help to thread the needle by, if you're gonna develop in a subdivision, that you also have those cluster subdivision requirements of, so if you have those, that square footage of land, and you have to put it, if you're doing a subdivision, if you're just doing lot splits, you can have it at that level. But if you're doing a subdivision, then it has to be a cluster subdivision, and you have to protect some of the land. And we haven't said how you protect that land, and I agree that, it has to be, the town is when they make the ordinance, you're gonna have to set a set of rules for what that means. Like, it's not like junk land that nobody can walk on, like, you have to have a plan for how that's gonna work. If what you want is open space, if all you want is rural character, and you just wanna make sure that there's not a house everywhere, then it doesn't really matter if it's junk land. And if it's wetlands, you're protecting habitat, right? So, you're not gonna put a house in them anyway, but you are now making it conserved open space that is there forever. So, maybe a way to get through those two things that people are looking for is to say, if you're gonna do a subdivision, so say somebody wanted to do a 6-lot subdivision of 2-bedroom houses, then they have to protect a certain amount of land. Same as the attainable housing requires. But then you don't have to use the attainable housing requirements. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion.
sir.
I think this is a very important discussion, and I'm listening to it very intensely, partly because as the dialogue this way has been going on, it hasn't been specifically, well, is it 15,000, is it 20,000? It's numbers that frankly go right over my beady little head. But it's more about principles and policies and so on. And I want to ask, and so when I look at tables such as that, my eyes glaze over, totally. And I don't understand them, frankly. It's beyond me. I think it's clear that we are setting forth here a plan that will have to be implemented through, words too fancy, legislation, policies and zoning and whatever.
Yeah.
And I assume that the select board is not going to take that on, the three of them to do it. They're going to appoint a task force, a committee, whatever, to do this. And that they're going to give them a certain amount of time. I hope they give them a timeline. They say 2 years, 3 years. Come back now and show us how this all works out. I'm concerned, and I go back to a point you made earlier, Judy, which I think is an important one. You want to be specific enough to be clear, but you want to allow enough wiggle room so that people that have to implement it, who will spend more time on it than we have been able to actually do it. And my sense is, because all those numbers just freeze my brain, that we're being too specific, and that we should back it down a notch or two in terms of the principles. The principle on that earlier table, the one that we showed, this table, that needs to be, I don't want to rewrite, that's vision, but someplace under that vision thing on land use, we need more of the kind of narrative discussion that just took place about what we're really trying to accomplish as guidance to this zoning task force, or whatever the hell it's called. And then we can give them some real specifics. And the map is fine as long as we say, this is the map that we think makes sense right now. And we think we're going to work on it, but we understand that the implementation and the final approval by the select board may vary. As long as that flexibility is allowed in this plan, I'm very comfortable with all the work done to date. But we need to give that, in that sweet spot between specificity and generality. I'm not sure we're there.
Well, what I will say is that, so we've tried to get the generality in the descriptions, the written descriptions that are there. But your previous comp plan was general and didn't have this much detail in it, and when the detail came out, people were surprised.
Exactly,
Right,
exactly.
so I think we do want some detail. If
Yes.
people squish numbers around a little bit here and there, I don't think anybody's gonna come back and say, oh, you didn't follow the comp plan. Nobody's gonna hold you to exactly 30,000 square feet. If you say it should be 25,000 square feet or 35,000 square feet, I don't think somebody's gonna come back and say, you know, you totally ignored what the plan said.
Yeah.
So I think you have that space. I think you can put in there, you know, either you must do cluster, or you can say that when you're making this into legislation, you should consider that there should be a cluster provision in this, you know, in the rural areas in order to protect rural character. So I think there are lots, you know, and I think that gives what you want to give is whoever is the person creating rules enough guidance that they're not just hanging out in the wind
Absolutely.
going like, this,
Absolutely.
you know, because we can say, we've heard from a lot of people, we've talked to people, you know, we've heard all these different things and we've tried to balance them. And this is where we've come out. It might not be perfect, but when it comes down to making those actual rules, we're gonna give people that ability to, you know, tighten them up. They're gonna draw the lines again along parcel lines, and they're gonna make it tighter in that way, and they're gonna tighten this up, and they're gonna make the open space clear, like, this is what you could put in open space, this is how it has to be done, this is who owns it, this is what happens. Like, all that stuff gets done in the ordinance provisions.
Exactly.
I-
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to know, I think we should ask ourselves whether or not we want to propose that we amend or that we change the subdivision standards from 80,000 square feet to really actually 30,000 square feet if you want to just build a one-bedroom unit. So
I think we can leave that, and after this has been decided and we get to this, then we get an ordinance committee. It'll have nothing to do with the select board. Ordinance committee, they'll put together an ordinance with, you know, maybe the same group of people hash out.
God
you know, what
forbid.
size-
Well, you know, then maybe it shouldn't be, maybe that shouldn't
nominating
be
you.
in there, you know, because.
Well, you're saying the generalities of it are in here, but when it comes to the nuts and bolts, it'll go to the town vote. An ordinance will be decided, it'll be written, and then, like any ordinance, it has to go to, you know, you go to a town meeting, you open it. The people
If that's what
decide.
the committee wants to do.
Well, I don't know if that's what they want to do or not, but that's what I'm thinking. And that's what I'm hearing out of you two over there, so.
So, Amy, could you explain a little bit for me, a little bit more? You characterized some of these ideas as sort of in conflict with keeping the rural nature.
Yes.
And so my sort of casual assumption is that the rural nature of our town is under threat if young families and working people can't afford a place here. It becomes a rural community of mostly gray-haired people and fishermen driving in from Lisbon to get their traps and go out. So my assumption has been anyway, that part of doing these smaller lot sizes or whatnot is to help ensure a healthy, vibrant rural culture going forward. My worry would be if we don't do something like this, whatever becomes tighter, we'll end up increasingly, McMansion. And what you've seen now, it will be even more in the next 10 years. The dynamics that have brought us to where we are in the rest of the country with people making money, a small number making money hand over fist, will continue, and these properties will continue to look good and affordable for them. So I think let's turn, I would hope that we would find a way to make affordable housing aligned with our vision of a healthy rural culture.
Are you asking me something, or are
Well,
you?
I feel like you put those in conflict, and you see a way that they could be less directly in conflict.
Well, I think they are in some ways in conflict, because if you're going to define rural character as having large open spaces with wooded areas, with the natural environment being a major focus, or one of the major focuses, a big proponent of the town, then that's one thing. And I think one of the things we all love about Harpswell is, people say when you drive past the boundary from Brunswick, you come into Harpswell, it's like your pressure drops. Part of that is because of the landscape and the visual character of the community. So for me, the rural quality of a community is partly its visual characteristic. I'm just a visual person. It's also its natural habitat, so it's being able to, go hunting or go fishing or do whatever. People used to hunt on our land, they don't anymore because it's been suburbanized. And I think, I don't disagree with you that rural character implies, a diverse community of diverse incomes, diverse housing types. But we're taking 90% of the town, and we are really changing, we're proposing to really change, in my opinion, what it's gonna look like and what the future developments are gonna look like. We're gonna increase the densities for subdivisions, and that is going to, one of the things I think that Mark has said, and he's right, we haven't seen a lot of subdivisions because the lot area requirement for subdivisions is pretty large. But if it's made smaller, I think we'll see quite a few more. And the pressure is definitely there from Brunswick. It's not gonna go away. So we're gonna see that pressure. It's already here. And if we reduce lot sizes and we increase densities, we're gonna see it even more. And that is in conflict with keeping rural character. So it's a balance. And my suggestion would be that we allocate certain areas for higher densities, but that we don't allow it in 90% of the town.
Matt?
I disagree, because the numbers we heard from Judy at the last meeting were the majority of new houses over the last 10 years were built in CF2, weren't they?
Not the majority, but
Significant amount. So I think a significant amount of the houses that are coming in are being built on the water, for the water views and stuff like that. And young people, working people like myself, can't afford that property to begin with unless it's in the family, and you get lucky. So the only place we do have to move is that interior zone. And if zoning isn't changed, as somebody who just bought a house here very recently, I looked at land first, and my parents had land, but they didn't have enough land to give me to meet those requirements for me to build a house there, and they had 3.5 acres. So if that was changed, I would have been able to build my 2-bedroom house on a small lot next to my parents for me and my wife. Instead, we bought a 4-bedroom house on a smaller lot than I would have had. We used more water. I'd like to see it changed to be based on bedrooms and the interior changed if we want to see young people able to move into this town. It's impossible. I mean, the average price of a house in this town is closing in on $1 million now. That's more money than I make in a decade.
Well, I'm not gonna argue that it's hard to find a house lot in the town of Harpswell. That's a market force that is beyond any of our ability to control. And I would suggest that it's not going to go down. It's just gonna keep going up. I
agree.
I lived and worked in the town of Brunswick, and we all have our own stories. I couldn't afford to buy there either. We all have that, and I can't, but I sympathize with you. I see where you are, but I'm not convinced that opening up 90% of the town to smaller lots is going to make our town a more livable and better community. I just am not there.
But I'm not convinced it's gonna change the ruralness if we do it either. Like, I mean, it's pretty rural as it is, and I'd rather see 22-bedroom houses in a small subdivision than I would 5 10-bedroom monstrosities stretched across a 5-acre property. I'd at least get to know my neighbors in the 2-bedroom houses versus the people that are gonna put the big gate up around their 10-bedroom house and call the cops when I walk too close to it. I completely disagree. I'm gonna take the other,
I hope you're not suggesting that I'm asking for, multi-million-dollar monstrosities and, et cetera, because personally, I live in a home that's heated by wood, and it's been heated by wood since I've lived there for 30 years, so I don't live in that kind of a house.
no, but I
And I
think,
don't disagree with you either. I think the wealthy come in and push people out. I'm totally with you on that. That's why I have said, this requires a lot of thinking, and it requires heart, because protecting rural character is part of protecting our sanity as human beings. I'm not wanting, $5 million houses on the coast. I'm wanting places that people can go and walk and see the natural environment and live in a place that is clean, with clean water and clean air and not a huge amount of traffic. That's my goal. It's not to exclude anybody, it's to protect the jewel that we have here, because people will come and take it. I have seen it everywhere.
Yes, George.
So, this is a question or a comment or whatnot, but talking about subdivisions, and if you make the lot sizes smaller and the houses will be a little smaller, obviously the lot would be worth a little less money, the house would be worth a little less money, because we're downsizing, right? But my question is will it be affordable? You could still put a high price on it, so that, and we're also talking about, you guys are going back and forth here, Matt's talking about a situation where it wasn't a subdivision, I guess would be the easiest way to put it. The land was already there, and situations like that would be much different than a subdivision. So it's kind of a, I don't know how to say, it's not here nor there, but it's a juggling
Apples and oranges.
juggling act, I guess, so to speak. If you're talking about a small piece of land where you're gonna put in two houses, and a family's gonna split it, or whether, that's one thing, or a subdivision where there may be 20 acres and now we're gonna shove a bunch of houses in there, that's completely different subject. So it's kinda,
Let me make a
it's a fine line
suggestion.
to walk on, but.
It is.
I think this is an important topic, but just to remind everybody, we have identified a couple of places in the town where hopefully attainable or affordable housing can be located. That's a good starting point. But I'd also point out that in the 15 years or so that the workforce housing has been in place, it's almost never been, the possibility of doing that has almost never been followed up on. We have Hamilton Place, and is there one more place here in town?
Nope, that's it.
That's it. And that's all that's happened in 15 years. So, I think the point is that even if the houses are slightly smaller than what you see coming in a number of other areas in Harpswell, they're still probably gonna be out of touch for a lot of people in the area.
Are they gonna be affordable, I guess was my
Yeah,
question.
and
And that's the goal.
the value of the land in Harpswell is gonna do nothing but probably increase. And so, I think we have to keep a lot of things in mind, but I also understand that we don't want to just open up a huge chunk of Harpswell for cluster housing, or whatever the case might be. I think we're gonna be creating problems that we don't want. Water is one, maybe. Traffic, you can go on and start adding things. So I think we need to think about this maybe for another couple of weeks.
Years.
I think we need to be careful about conflating two things.
Yeah.
We keep putting them together. So there's two issues that need to be decided. One is, do you want the interior zone to have one standard for all lots and not two standards like you did before, which was purposefully to not have subdivisions? And it worked. You didn't have a lot of subdivisions. I mean, the only reason I can think, I don't know any other town that has a higher square foot for subdivisions than it does for single lots,
I agree.
anywhere.
Brunswick does.
Okay, well, to me, the purpose is to not have subdivisions if you do that. You're trying to reduce the number of subdivisions. 80,000 square feet, nobody's gonna build a small house. You can't on 80,000 square feet. So, by definition, if you keep that, you get big houses on big lots. So if that's what you want, then we need to keep that standard and add that in. You have to decide, is that what you want, or do you want this other choice for the whole area?
Why can't you build a small house on a big lot?
You
Because they
can,
don't make as much
but a
money.
developer won't because the
Oh,
lot costs too much
from a
money.
development standpoint, yeah,
Yeah, Matt could.
right.
I mean,
Exactly.
if you already own the land, you can put
Exactly.
whatever size house you
Okay.
want on it. But a developer, somebody coming in and putting houses on it is not going to, because it's not worth it.
Okay.
I think, so one question is, what size lots do you envision and how do you want them to be? So for your interior zone, could you envision the idea of Randall Errant clustered around the areas where development makes the most sense and preserving areas so that you preserve your rural character? So that's one option. And you could require that all things are done that way. Or you could say if it's a subdivision, it has to be done that way. So that's an issue of what can happen throughout the whole zone. The attainable housing incentive is if I build something and have income requirements and a whole bunch of other things, then I can get tighter, so it's not like I'm just gonna build attainable housing because I feel like it. It's setting it up so that if somebody wants to build attainable housing and have the restrictions that the housing committee has recommended, that they could get an extra bonus for that. That's a separate issue. That's like totally separate from what the whole interior zone should look like and what development that happens in the interior zone should look like going forward. What I think you're trying to balance in that part of it, so leave the attainable housing part of it out altogether. In that part, what you are trying to balance is the ability to build not only 4-bedroom McMansions, 5-bedroom McMansions on 80,000 square feet, but some other types of housing, and how could you creatively do that? Or do you want to say, in the interior zone, I'm perfectly happy for them to all be McMansions, because we're gonna require that they be big lots with big houses on them.
I want to just point out, there's more than one way to maintain the wooded quality and what we have here. The last planning task force called for an open space plan,
Which we
which
have.
when it got created, led to the land trust creating lots of preserves and easements around those open spaces. So one of the things we may want to think about is encouraging the land trust to do that in the future.
If they
With
have the
other
money,
areas.
yeah.
And it says
Well,
that in the
it's-
plan, it says continue to implement the town's open.
always
Clearly,
been
easements
available.
are a way to preserve what's there and to make it unlikely that anybody's going to build a McMansion on
Yeah,
it.
that's always been available, so
Yeah.
that's not. Has anyone looked at the smart growth? You were gonna send that out.
No, actually, I tried to get a copy of the book,
Oh, okay.
and they do have a copy at Curtis Library in Brunswick, but it's been checked out.
Which
Ironically, this is,
book are you looking for?
The smart growth book that.
I thought it was a rural, it's the book by that gentleman that you
Randall
recommended.
Arendt.
Randall Aaron.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Judy's got it in her,
I do have it
briefcase.
in my office, I'll be happy to pick it up and let people borrow it.
And also the
I
smart
use it all the
growth,
time.
someone mentioned the smart growth provisions for maintaining rural. I think it was Howard that brought that up. And
Yeah.
oh, that
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
that was sent out, and understand that was a piece that was done 15 years ago by Evan
Yep.
for Grossmart.
But I don't think,
On the-
I did not have a chance to send that out to the task force.
Well,
Yeah,
I thought
I
I
didn't
sent
see
it
it.
out I thought I sent it out.
I don't think I saw it.
If you would send it out, that would be great, because I'll be honest with you, my technology got in the way of my efficiency, inability, so. Yes,
Once
sir.
again, I wish we were having this discussion 3 or 4 months ago, so we had time to let it season and to really sort of think. I think we're beginning to engage in really important policy issues. that are coming to the fore. Amy, you've said 90%, you're talking about the brown areas on the map. right?
Yes.
Okay. It seems to me that, I mean, when you say it, it sounds horrifying. It says, oh my God, 90% of this could be open to these little 2-acre lots or whatever. Well, almost certainly that's not gonna happen, first of all. But it could happen more than we would like it to. And the question is there ways just to simply say, to limit, to the extent that the tables that freeze my mind, say, well, let's go to 1 bedroom, or let's go to 10, or let's go to all these things, to try to bring things down so that, Matt, your problem can get solved. Well, it's too late for you, but for others.
I hear that a lot.
Can we say that to the extent, can we say that, and if we discover in the course of this 10-year plan that in that brown area here, all of a sudden, it's hit 10% of these tiny little places that are hurting our rural character, it stops.
That's hard to do.
Well, the problem, I think, clearly is the limitations of zoning, isn't it? Because zoning is a blunt instrument, and it has unintended consequences, and David hit on part of it is, and I have to acknowledge my wife is the chair of the Harpswell Land Trust, so, but I'm not pushing the land trust as such, but the land trust solution is within the market solution. You just go out, you raise the damn money, and you buy it. And then you say, we're putting trails on a nice sign and hopefully some parking, and it's done.
Whoa, wait.
It's not just that. Go ahead.
Well, an
My
easement.
understanding is a number of their recent acquisitions have been at below market prices.
Well, but they've worked deals, yes.
Yeah, they've worked
Well,
deals.
partly because
And a lot
of
of
very
easements are
generous,
free, are
generous
given.
landowners have lowered the price. But the
Philanthropy
point
for
is,
tax
they're
write-offs.
working on the market principle of buying land.
Agreed.
And I don't think that we want to put into the town budget, $250,000 every year for buying land. I mean, that's not a fair use of taxpayers' money. The voluntaristic approach of the land trust is a good one, and so on, and we could encourage it with nice words in the plan, but it wouldn't mean much, because we're back then to the blunt force instrument of zoning.
So agree that zoning is a blunt force instrument, and it is very difficult to, I don't know of a way, and I have certainly thought about this for a very long time, about that you could write something in there that would stop development because it wouldn't be fair, right?
Yep.
You can do it through a growth management ordinance that only allows, that the permits go up exceedingly high after you get to a certain number. So we are allowed to do that for a certain number of years, and there's a whole formula for figuring that out. So that's one option. I would say that in the implementation of a comprehensive plan, and I don't think towns do this enough, they certainly don't do it well, that you need to have a serious report every year of what's happened from your comp plan on that goes to the select board. And so if you find that you got 12 subdivision applications in year 1, you can then change your zoning to say, whoa, that is not what we intended, and you can come back and make those changes so that, and you know that that is happening. What you don't want to happen is 10 years from now, somebody like me is going back and looking at the numbers and mapping where all the things happened and went, oops, that didn't work well, right? Which is usually what happens.
Paved paradise and put up a parking lot.
Right. So Judy, two things. One, that's a really good idea and it should be done. Mark is overworked as it is and doesn't have the time, but it's a great idea. And I think it's not done because people just can't find the time. The second thing is, you may find that because of market forces, nothing seems to be happening. So you say, oh, it's all working just fine. But then all of a sudden, the door opens and everything happens all at once. And you're caught with your pants down. So no matter how many reports you may have done for the past 5 years, if the market doors open and you get inundated with proposals, well, that's just the way it is. There was one other thing. Oh, I wanted to ask you, what about the possibility of overlay zones? Suggesting overlay zones. So we have all this rural area, but maybe finding spots within the rural area where you can propose an overlay zone where under certain conditions, you can have higher densities.
I would just make them a different, in the future land use plan, I'd probably just make them a different district.
Okay,
But,
okay.
but you
It was
could do
just a
that in
thought.
zoning, make it an
It
overlay
was
zone
just
if
a
you
thought.
wanted.
And so it's
Well-
one way of really answering, in some ways, it does postpone, but it's also one way of answering that rural character and suburbanization issue
Yep.
by saying, look, we're gonna make rural character our top priority, or not, whatever you wanna do. But then, in these certain specific places, should the right proposal come along and meet the following conditions, then we'll allow for something else to happen.
Yeah.
Judy, just follow up on that. I mean, it would be possible to say, we're gonna have the rural district, and we're gonna have this lot sizes, or whatever. And as part of the recommendations, to say that the town should explore creating overlay zones without geographically identifying them, because I think my understanding of the 2005 plan was, as soon as you say, okay, this is where we're gonna allow more dense development, it explodes. And to say that as part of the rural district, the town should explore creating overlay districts that would allow increased density for developments that meet the following standards or whatever.
I just said, exactly.
Yeah, and you could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of kicking the can down the road, and it might make sense to do. Because I think it's very hard to look at that area and say, okay, there's 20 acres that are big enough and landowner interested enough to do something with. You could do that.
Okay, let's work on that. Let's come back in 2 weeks. Let's hit this a little bit harder again.
How about this, in 1 week, well, if I'm well enough, I swear.
Oh, you're not gonna be here, Judy.
But
It's really
that
what I
we
did.
have a set of options for
All right,
people to
okay.
consider
Yeah.
before the next meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
sounds
I'll
good.
pull together
Excellent.
what people said,
Excellent.
or Madeline will, and we'll get it back out to you all, so that when
Perfect.
you come back in 2 weeks, you can say, yep, I like this one, no, I don't like that one, or I wanna combine those two.
Okay, sounds
Perfect,
Something like that.
perfect.
And I
Include in
will,
this-
and we will have called, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Maybe include in the strategies, the early warning system
Yep,
from 45,
Yeah, and
mass developments.
we will coordinate calling communities that have the density by bedroom
Yeah.
thing and
Right.
say, maybe you and I can talk about a list of common questions that we'll ask
Sure.
them, and then we'll report back to you on what those are.
And I'll write a letter to our fellow committee chairs and encourage them to read the appropriate parts of the plan. And
We're all doing great.
and if people wanna comment, the plan's online, and, you know, if there's things, if
Right.
there's specifics in there you want us to know about, or just email us or call, whatever makes the best sense for you,
This is
all of it
great.
works.
Okay, so
The 24th at 6?
is our next regular meeting. We're gonna get an input from Judy before that,
It's gonna
and
be all better by then.
we'll be all better. So Mickey is almost at the 8 o'clock hour, and I think we've gone for close to 2 hours now. Not quite, but I think
Oh, yeah.
I think we've
Our brain power has been
beat enough
extinguished.
trees down. So I would propose that we adjourn this meeting and reconvene in 2 weeks.